Okay, so here we are at the Battle of Utica. I've tried to show you what I can of kind of the movement and combat of the game. That's the main meat of the game. Right now we're kind of a cleanup phase. These guys should all be flipped over. They're not. Remember, I'm kind of lazy when I can. I didn't use Hamilcar again. I should probably move him up to where he can command another, possibly Mago. I don't think he's in range. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nah, he's not in range anyway. But it gets him closer to the battle, which is probably safe. Okay, so what happens at this point is sort of this, like I said, a cleanup phase. I tend to do it all at once, flipping all my moved counters over. And rather than do this, we'll take a look at what else we have. We have low missile, which comes off because there's nothing that can interfere with it. The only things that can interfere with removing a low missile marker are if you're in somebody's zone of control, or if you're in range of a missile unit that could hit you. It has to not be low missile then. That would be done simultaneously, so if, for example, these guys had missiles and these guys had missiles, neither one could remove. But as it stands, we got no problem taking these off. And those probably, I think this guy moved. It's hard to remember. I know this guy did not. So, for example, when we look over here, these guys, none of them can recover their missiles because they're all affected by other people who have, well, they're in zones of control. At the same time as I'm doing this, I tend to do the routes, which these guys will be routing. They go 6 X's. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And they couldn't go through a zone of control, but they can run pretty close to these elephants here. These guys also will be routing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Facing doesn't much matter when you're routing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All these are going to be moving. Now this guy's got to keep routing this way. He could run through my units. That seems foolish, though. I'm allowed to try and get him out without moving through the units. So he's just going to run up there. All these are going to get flipped. Nothing else was routed. The only other action we saw, other than what you saw, was a little bit of moving forward with this line. And I may have cheated a little bit because, for example, this leader was not in exactly the position I wanted him in to command a line. I don't worry about things like that when I'm playing solitaire. I fudge them a little because I figure I'm not able to pay as much attention maybe as I would in a two-player game. The truth of the matter is I'm really, really lousy at keeping attention on details like that. So, anyway, I'm not going to sit here and let you watch me flip all the counters, although that's a big part of the game, to tell you the truth. All this flipping and cohesion hits and, using your leaders to reduce cohesion hits, we didn't see that yet. I may show that if I do that at some point, but I don't know if it's all that big a deal. All you do is when you activate a leader, instead of moving a unit, you can say, I'm healing that unit. If it's a routed unit, you look at the routed unit. The leader's initiative, it has to be in range of the leader. The leader's initiative is 1 is added to that. You roll a die. If you get less than that sum, so for example, let's say I had Mago here trying to rally something like that if he was in range, I'd have to get a 5 or less. It would rally, and it gets this little rallied marker, which indicates it can't move. And I roll a die over on some table or another. Yeah, there are a lot of tables in this game. On the rally table, based on the base tactical quality, and I see how many hits it takes. And it takes depleted hits. Depletions essentially are a combat shift against you if you get involved in combat to indicate that the force has been weakened. And that's it. I can also activate units to rally them to remove cohesion hits. And in those cases, I can remove 2 cohesion hits each time I do a rally on a unit. I think each leader is only allowed to rally a particular unit once during its sequence of activations. And each unit, yeah, there's no limit to the amount of times the different leaders can do that, as long as they can command the unit. And you just remove 2 cohesion hits from the unit. If it's a depleted unit and you remove the last 1 or 2 cohesion hits from it, you get a little depleted marker to indicate that it's still not full strength. That's really about it. There's some funky, fancy stuff like, you know, who can withdraw in front of, who has to withdraw, who can withdraw, issues like that, where you have to understand the special rules that pertain to the particular units that you have involved in the combat. And some of the scenarios, not this one, have a lot of special rules on them, like the flaming pigs or the ox carts or whatever. And that's just a matter of, you know, maybe a couple paragraphs of rules to try to simulate something that wasn't common in the battles, but is of interest. The Roman legions have some very, very specific and stringent leadership rules. And I kind of cheated those when I first was playing, forgetting that they existed. And they make it very, very difficult for the Romans to actually command their armies as well as you'd expect them to. You'd think they'd have a command advantage. And with all their leaders, it usually felt that way in the early ones. Well, more and more it's feeling, as I'm playing by the rules correctly, it's feeling like the Roman army is actually really, really hard to command as well as, say, the Greek armies or the Carthaginian ones. The Carthaginian ones are especially easy because they have special rules, not in this scenario, but post-Hannibal, where, or at least during Hannibal's period, where they have an easier time making line commands than most armies do, which is kind of an interesting issue. On the other hand, the Romans have some neat rules that cover their manipular legions and how they can stack and, you know, moving through units, which follows these charts as to what you do. And it's just really a matter of you look up the different varieties. So, for example, you look up the moving unit versus what it's moving through or stopping in, and you see what happens there. Likewise, route has the similar one. Cav pursuit, when Cav defeat Cav. We might have seen that over here. We saw Cav fighting Cav. If Cav route other Cav, they might chase them off the map. If Cav route anything, they might chase them and get to hit them again. What else do we have? We have a list of what you're supposed to make tactical quality checks on and what the effect is. Whether or not it's a check that you have to roll, you know, that it's just a 1-point effect, or if it's the difference between the die roll and your tactical quality. Number of terrain effects and other types of movement, etc., that can affect your cohesion hits. Movement of terrain effects chart for movement. All pretty simple there. And that's about it. Anything exciting on here that we didn't cover? Yes. So this is important here. First of all, you have a list of all the different kinds of commands that you could make when you order units. And then here you have line command eligibility chart. And this is put per battle for the initial battles. It tells you which units can be moved together in a line if they otherwise manage to qualify as a line. For example, being flank to flank or end to end qualifies. Now I kind of fudge that. I say this is a line. It's a column. That way I don't have to mark my columns only along a hex row. I'm not sure how well the rules cover that situation, but personally I don't want to read that. I just know that this should be a line, even if they're not in exactly the formation that's expected. This scenario has its own specific somewhere line eligibility chart, and some of them say just use the line eligibility from another battle or whatever, but this one has very different types of units, etc., so it's necessary to handle that. Alright, well, we're going to go on to the next turn then, and I'm hoping somebody got something out of this, because it was painful for me. Alright, I'll flip over the rest of the counters and then come back on the next turn. So we see one of the tough spots of this scenario, for the rebels especially, the elephants, and of course good cavalry as well. But the elephants in particular, there are a decent number of them in this scenario, are just almost invulnerable. They can attack well enough. Elephants hitting the medium infantry is a 9 on the front. They have good mobility, so they can conceivably, although turning is difficult, but they can conceivably get good flank attacks, as we saw a little earlier. And finally, when the infantry attack them, the results are really bad. If we look at the medium infantry trying to attack elephants, it's going to be attacking on the 3 table. That's terrible. On top of that, the elephants have a missile capability. They don't have tactical advantage, the superiority advantage, but they're significantly good in terms of their total overall rating. They're facing this kind of infantry, especially, not terribly good infantry, 5 tactical quality. They're just not going to get budged. And, you might see a few of them rampage, but for the most part, they're not going to be easy for the infantry to hit. So I'm looking at this commander who could make a line command and just charge forward with his forces. That doesn't seem like a great idea. On the alternative, if he stands there, he's going to get flanked. I think I have to use his command. By the way, I chose not to have good old Hamilcar actually use his elite bonus this time. It didn't seem like a great advantage. So now it is on this guy's hands, and honestly, I think the best thing he can do is to advance and attack. But it's not a great option. Of course, beyond the elephants, there isn't that much that Carthage has. It has this light infantry, which isn't horrible. It's got the Sacred Band Cav, and then it's got stuff that's really pure garbage. But it's not like what the rebels have is all that good, other than perhaps the legions and a couple other key units in there. This Libyan heavy infantry is pretty good. If I can get that into play, that's not facing the elephants either, so it might be hitting in fairly good shape, assuming this Cav doesn't demolish it first. One key element, and I'm using the tripod again here, that I have not shown is, and I'm hoping that I can kind of catch this on here. Over here, we have an elephant that's routed. A lot of the games I've played have had elephants in them, and I just want to go over how an elephant rout works. Very briefly, not that it's a huge issue, but when an elephant routs, it doesn't rout and run away like anything else, and I used a special marker to remind me of that. This just happened from that initial clash before the actual Clash of Arms table or anything like that is checked. All you do is make that tactical quality check when I launched these infantry at the pachyderm line. Now, this guy ended up going above his tactical quality rating, so he would normally rout if he's a unit, but in this case, he's an elephant, he rampages. Now the first die roll on a rampage automatically has an effect, and we follow, there's this little rosette here where 1 aims this way, 2 aims this way. That covers the first 6 numbers. Other numbers that can have an effect, on a 7 through 9, it runs away from the unit that caused the rampage, and on a 0, it goes to the nearest friendly unit. We'll see how this works. I rolled a 9, which means it's going to go away directly. Now it was attacked this way, I'm going to allow it to go this way. It goes 2 hexes. So it doesn't try to trample him, and I don't know if he's allowed to run. I think he is. Doesn't much matter, I'm going to move him. Yeah, he wasn't going to help anyway. Now we get another one. Now there can be a maximum of 3 of these, I believe, right? 3 or 4. I don't rightly remember. We'll see what happens. Okay, the second one's a 7, and on anything more than a 6, on the second or further die roll, the elephant is just destroyed. And now we have our first death of the game, actually. And that's going to be some tactical quality. I think those only cost 2, though, towards the victory conditions in most scenarios, and this one would follow that then. Alright, I'll continue with the battle and then give you a quick snapshot, perhaps, of what happened after this engagement. But we see those infantry did charge forward and slammed along the line, and we also got a couple of those legionary units up in the front. They're not actually attacking at this point. They're just forming a little bit more solid line. I'm going to try to build up something that can launch a reasonable attack if the elephants get out of the way. So if you remember in the... just restarted this because I wanted to catch on this key topic as well. If you remember in one of the earlier videos, I showed that the attacker might not want to attack with all his units. And often that's the case because you have to make a tactical quality check on each unit that's engaging for the first time. But now that I'm engaged, these 2 have already attacked. Now one of them caused that elephant to run away. Instead of splitting these, and this guy's going to be doing a flank attack, I'm going to use both of these on this one. That's actually an advantage, having 2 units against 1 here. Normally size isn't that big a deal. So here we have 2 medium infantry attacking the elephant. Well, we'll look that up real simply. Medium infantry against the elephant. As we noted before, that's on the 3 table, which is really, really crappy. But because I've got 10 strength points against 5, I shift it 1. That puts me on the 4 table. Now I make a roll. I roll a 9, which is very good. On the 4 table, that's a 2 and a 2. That means, and the whole combat chart is kind of very gradual, so a good roll on that side ends up being not that bad a result. The elephant takes 2. That's going to rout the elephant because he's up above his tactical quality. And I'll put a little marker to remind me that he's going. But now these guys take 2, and this guy routs because he goes above his limit. But this guy is only at 1. And here's what's cool. These guys got to split the damage among them, so neither one was hurt very badly. So even though the initial engagement causes more damage to your units if you've got a lot of units engaging at once, you are able to spread out the damage from the actual combat. And that's probably the biggest advantage to having numbers in a combat. Well, now we continue down the line. Remember, we got to do all the combats before we take care of any of the results of it. So I'm going to pause and go away and probably come back when the whole combat is finished. As I often like to do, I lied to you. Let's take a look at what happened right here, where this unit attacked this elephant here, and we see the elephant is rampaging. I got a 3-2 result. The attacker took 3, the defender took 2. That was enough to make both units rout. Now, the one that routed the worst actually routs. It turns out here they tied, and ties are broken depending on who moved, basically. Here, the attacker is charging, so he has the advantage. He breaks the defender. If he had been standing still, he wouldn't have that advantage, and I believe he would have broken instead. So here we're in an interesting situation where we have a number of elephants rampaging. Here, 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 and here. All those units marked in red, they're not the right counters. The rules aren't very good about this. They don't specify what to do in terms of order of each one. I'm going to roll them all simultaneously, and you're going to kind of see how this line dissolves. This thing's routing at the same time, but it might get trampled. Alright, so let's start with this one. And this is for the first roll of the rampage of all of each one. He goes in direction 5, which is going to be this way. So he runs 1, 2, and runs into this. They go 3 hexes. I may have cheated last time and only moved him 2. I had to look that up, but it didn't really matter. It was only a leader. He would have gotten out of the way. This thing takes at least a hit. That is going to kill it, because it's already routed, and it's these Balearics. Okay, let's take care of this next one. 9, that's route directly away from the unit that scared it. That'll be this guy. This one, 4, he's going to route this way. He slams into these Numenidians. Now he's slamming into the front of infantry. That only does 1 hit, I believe, to the infantry. But that's enough to rout the infantry. I think I should be moving these, because he's in this hex now. He's made it here. And now we got this final one here. I had decided that earlier at a different point and kind of forgot about it. 5, he's routing this way into another elephant. Now I believe that does 2 points of damage because it's hitting in the flank. I wanted to make sure elephants hit elephants. And that sends this one rampaging. Alright, so this one, I'm going to roll it as well. It's the last of the first round rampages, so I don't have to keep track of that. And it rolls a 4. It's going to head this way into these Numenidians and send them routing. And you can see this is almost as messy as what happened in my GDW Raffia game. And this guy, remember, routed into here. That's 1 round of routing. Now we're going to go to the second. Alright, I'll play that out too. Okay, on to this one. 9, that's good enough to kill the elephant. Basically the rider does him in. Let's go to this one. 5. He heads off this way. This one. 7, good enough to kill the elephant. I feel badly for the elephants, to tell you the truth. And 5, off this way again. Okay, that was the end of 2. This is the third. Try this one. 9, good enough to kill him. And over here, 7, good enough to kill him. So that's the kind of action that happens with an elephant rout. You can see it had a devastating effect. If he had some infantry up front or whatever, it would have caused more. 1 elephant caused another rampage as well. Anyway, we'll come back in a little bit. And now down here we see Magos pushed his elephants forward, and he got 3 actions, able to kind of recover, etc. These are routed infantry. He's basically dissolved that entire wing with the his right wing of the elephants. This is where the rebel forces start again, is right here. So those elephants are just going to keep crushing forward. There's not much the rebels can really do about them. Alright. the rebel right flank moves into play, shifting up some of the heavies into here. The light infantry smashed into the lights here, drove one back. The cav intercepted, ran up and charged, throwing javelins. They routed, being somewhat weaker, even though they had a flank attack. Alright, so that moves the action over to the next leader. Will be a 5 initiative leader, because all the 4 initiatives are gone. And it's got to be a Carthaginian if there are any available, and there are. Alright, well, we see Hasdrubal has hit with his heavy cav and is pretty much crushing the right flank of the rebel forces. They tried to sort of anchor themselves on the edge of the map. That's kind of cheating. Some of the scenarios have rules to avoid that. This one doesn't specify, but I think I would have allowed it anyhow. Basically where you can swing around and add to the map there, because it wouldn't make sense to anchor yourself where there isn't terrain that's specified for the map. And we're really seeing where the weakness of this rebel force is. It's not able to defend itself. It only had a couple of cav units total, and they're both been routed. So now the flanks are being crushed. The light infantry's here. This militia isn't going to do much, but as long as it can kind of stay in the center and look like a force, it's something of a threat, so that breaking the line won't work. And breaking the line won't work anyway, because the elephants and the heavy cav are so much more mobile that they can just run around anything that the rebels are able to try to set up as a line. The only thing the rebels could do, and I should have probably done this, was try to form a square like we saw with the Romans. Unfortunately, the rebel forces probably still couldn't have handled it. Head-on attacks from those elephants were able to break that line, the line here. These aren't legionaries for the most part. Alright, so here we are at the end of the turn, and we're seeing that the rebel really is rabble. Broken up, everything routing over here, none of that can be recovered. We get the elephants coming forward. They're just going to roll up this line. There's just not enough force to build a decent square even. I'm trying to pull some infantry forward to try to stop that, but those elephants are just too fast. They're going to get the jump. I could use an elite leader move to smash those units. It's just not going to hold. Likewise, over on this flank, the cav is chewing that up a bit. Here's the cav defense for that, running away. It's just too hard to defend this. Now, this is not a terribly exciting scenario, but I enjoy playing little blowouts like this every now and then. It's a small scenario, which makes it easy to play, made it easy to show some of the rules with. Let's look at what the points are. I believe elephants count 2 each. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. We're going to look at 17 tactical points that the Carthaginians lost, and 13 that the rebels lost. That in no way represents what's happening on the battlefield. This is a rout for the rebels. It's very clearly over. I'll still play it out, but I just want you to realize how much, how little the points represent what's happening on the battlefield. Now, sometimes the points are close enough, but here we're talking 50, 55 points that we need to hit. Sometimes the points are close enough to indicate or to allow the guy who's got the tactical advantage on the field to still lose. In this case, though, what we're seeing is the cost of elephants. Elephants come swinging into play, and they're very fragile, but they can do so much damage. And the quantity of elephants in this battle pretty much seals the rebels' fate here.